Just a couple of books I'm going to be using today. The Myth of Normal, which is my new Bible. Gabriel Mate, it's so good. And then Mitch Albom, Tuesdays with Morley, and if anybody's read that one, same author, Have a Little Faith. Some good stuff in there. Thought it was interesting. If you look at more standard translation of the scripture we're looking at today, Exodus 15, it's kind of broken in, this is broken into two little pieces. One is the Song of Moses, and it's, I think, 18 verses long or something like that. And then it's Miriam takes a tambourine and takes the ladies out and they go dancing, and it's 2 lines. That was kind of interesting. Miriam says, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and rider he has thrown into the sea." That was kind of interesting, curious what that says about kind of the culture at the time. And interesting considering if it hadn't been for the strength and faith of several women, Israelite and Egyptian, there would have been no Moses, and the rest of the story might have been a little bit different. I think Lizzie kind of highlighted this a few weeks ago. Thought it was interesting that the men stood around and sang and the women danced. I'm not sure what that meant about the time or the translation either, but said earlier today, where did they get the tambourines from? We're packing to hurry, right after you brush your doorpost with blood, just make sure you grab your tambourine because it might come in handy a little later, kind of thing. I don't know. But they had them, I guess, and they told Pharaoh they were going to worship God. So maybe that's what it was about too. This is just a meme I found. I thought it was kind of cute. Jesus and Moses parting of the sea, and Jesus says, "Not bad, but check this out. Why don't we just walk across?" But in the Book of Belonging, those 2 sections are combined into one in the Song of the Sea that Miriam leads. She kind of instigates that song. And I would be curious what it would be like for Miriam to be on the other side. With her, younger brother who she pushed out in a basket and fearful and hopeful. There was no idea if this was going to work out. It's an amazing story, but at the time, you had no idea. So now they're sitting on the opposite side, and what would they be feeling? Like grateful, shocked, disbelief? The stress, all this fear that they were feeling that's kind of subsided now. It's gone. And what would that be like to be there? Maybe look over at Miriam looks over at her brother and goes, Did you just see what I saw? What just happened there? Or, I think we're okay now. Or, wow, cool. So what's for breakfast? Yeah, I don't know what they would have said, but maybe that would have been more the Canadian response. But in that situation, I'm sure in that culture as well, that kind of response just isn't enough. There's not enough expression, not enough emotion. And in the Book of Belonging, it says, as the feelings flowed through them, the people began to make noise. It's good to feel and to make a noise. Feelings, emotions, those can be really taboo words. Have you ever heard it said, "Oh, he or she is just way too emotional"? Usually there's a rolling of the eye or something like that. So not being emotional, being strong and tough, that's kind of the message that's often perpetrated in our culture. Or have you ever heard or have you ever said, "Well, I just broke down"? Usually means I was sobbing and crying and was having a kind of difficult time. But that language, the language of breaking down, it's even that is a way of suggesting that emotion isn't healthy. It's not normal. And we're supposed to suppress those emotions. Something's wrong with me. The suppression of emotion and feelings, that's the normal, healthy way. But again, in Gabor's book, The Myth of Normal, he works really hard. It provides a ton of research proving the exact opposite in many ways. And Gabor starts with the basics of the emotional system. And we've got we've got very many systems in our bodies, but we've got a cognitive system up here, which is our left and right thinking part. We've got an emotional system back here, our limbic system, which is a bunch of parts and pieces, a little above my pay grade, but the amygdala is buried in there, and that's kind of the center, a major part, the amygdala, of our emotional system. It lets others know and lets us know when something's wrong. And funny thing about this emotional system, this limbic system, it develops way, way faster than our cognitive systems. Our cognitive systems take years to develop, and this emotional system, a lot of it is ready to go, especially the amygdala, at 6 months in the womb. It's got to be. When you come out, you have to be taking care of it. It has to let people know. And so that emotional system keeps us alive, and it works on assessing the connection between each other. And it's also much, much faster than our thinking system. You think about if you stepped out onto a street corner and on your phone or something, and there's a bus screaming towards you, and you had to use your cognitive system, go, now what should I do? Should I run across? Should I jump back on the curb? Should I wave my hands in the air so that the bus driver sees me? Well, that wouldn't end very well. So our emotional system will react in 0.4 or 0.1 of a second or something, and it engages us, and bang, we're out. So it's much more responsive than our cognitive system is. And so that we are emotional people. We like to believe, I think especially in our culture, therefore I think, therefore I am, and we place a lot of significance on how we think. And really we're a much more emotional people than we are cognitive, or just as much. And a lot of times, if we have some really negative emotional experiences as children, that really works into how we adapt and cope as we grow up. I had one of my supervisors say at one time, we have a childhood and we spend most of our adulthood trying to fix or correct what happened to parts of our childhood. And yeah, you can't, not that wrong about that. So in the myth of normal, Gabriel Mattei kind of reiterates another one of my favorite authors, Dr. Gordon Neufeld, Canadian psychologist. He's really great for child stuff. And he says, above all other things, for kids to mature, they need 4 things. One is a deep sense of contact and connection with those responsible for them. They need to be connected for those that they're with. Security that allows the child to rest from the work of earning their right to be who they are. Kids should not have to work at being okay, to work to have their parents' love. That's not okay. They need permission to feel their emotions, especially grief, anger, sadness, and pain. And when that happens, they remain safe and vulnerable, and that causes them to mature. The last thing is that kids need to play. That is when kids mature, is when they play. Not so much just when we teach them, but if they're doing imaginative play, that's when kids grow. And so most of Dr. Neufeld's research is for children, but I've just found from experience that for an adult, it's not that much different. If we switch the wording just a little bit, I think it's pretty close. Okay, so it's very similar. A deep sense of contact and connection with those close to us. For grow, we need to be connected to people. Second one, security that allows us to rest from the work of earning our right to be who we are. We shouldn't have to be somebody else than who we are. There's this fight within us sometimes between this wanting to be with people and this being authentic. We really need to be authentic. The third one, permission to feel our emotions, especially those ones, again, needing to be vulnerable. We grow well. And the experience of play. We all need to play. If the only thing we do is work, we run into trouble a little bit. But was thinking about this in the Song of the Sea. So in the first one, contact and connection. So if we look at what we heard today, there's this interchanging of the words I and we and us doing the same things, singing, dancing. There's the individual and there's the community. People may have different voices, they may have different movements, but it all kind of fits together. The message is that we are in some ways the same. There's this connection with each one of us. The I and the we, and then they interconnect God in with it. So this connection of I and we and God in the dancing and in the singing. There's this sense of connection for God who cares for us. And then you get the language that they use of God holding hands. And we have hands, and so we are held in God's hand. There's this connectedness. Gabor explores some research in his book here by a neuroscientist. And he's led to this conclusion that, this I thought was kind of interesting. This was his conclusion, that we are wired to attach, to connect with one another. As far as needs go, there is no greater one than to connect, to belong. All our needs are kind of secondary compared to that. We need to belong. We need to belong to each other. We need to belong to God. So the second one, security to rest from the work of earning the right to be who we are. So the people in this story were considered worthless and disposable. Slave labor was kind of how they were named. This is who they were, how they were regarded. But the Song of the Sea says, God defeats every lie and speaks truth over me. God will bring us to a peaceful place where we will dwell forever, resting from the work of proving ourselves. They got to rest. The third one, feeling our emotions and expressing emotions. Emotion needs expression. And how many times has anybody ever heard, I just bottle things up? And I don't know if anybody's ever heard that, but apparently I hear it quite a bit anyways. But in the Song of the Sea, the singing and dancing are a form of art. And art always expresses thoughts and it expresses emotion. And those two are really hard to connect, but art does it well. And there's this singing and dancing and this public confession of hurt and pain and joy all at the same time. This being vulnerable with one another. So that's going on as they do this. Again, singing and dancing are a form of art. And art expresses thought and emotion. And art is always, like I just said that, art is what connects thought and emotion. That's hard to do, but art does that. And I was thinking about this. Why do we think movies have music? Ever watch a movie without music? Nah, it's pretty flat. Anyways, and I remember as many years ago, watching I think it was Jaws 3 in 3D. And you know the Jaws music, right? Dun, 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 dun. Everybody's freaking out and your heart's pounding in this. So we're watching this and this fish, this shark is in this cage or something, and the tail is going back and forth and the music's going, and then they lost the sound. It was just gone. It was silent. And we're sitting there going, and this went on for a little bit, and then all of a sudden somebody in the theater goes, swish, 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 and then the whole theater's going, swish, swish, and we just burst into laughter like that was the end of the scary part for Jaws. It was done. It was kind of funny, But this idea, or this is what happens, this art expression connects us with our emotions. And that emotion needs to be expressed, and that's kind of what happens here in this song of Miriam and the people dancing and singing and playing tambourines. It's great, and that's more of the expression that they needed after this huge event. We just gotta let this go and express it. It's gotta come out. The fourth one, play in order to grow. So, in this case, singing and dancing is about play. It's not about work. It's not a competition. In our lives, I think, as adults, we desperately need some time where we play, where we're not working. In play, there doesn't have to be a specific outcome. We're just doing it because. One of the questions that we often ask couples as we're working with them is, what do you do to play? And very often struggling couples will go, well, we used to. And so we try and get them into playing, doing some things that are just fun and enjoyable. And then we talk about, this isn't funny language, but we talk about the work that play accomplishes. So we play, and it does this thing for us. It does this stress relief and also this connection. And lots of things can kind of disappear a little bit as we play. And sorry, staring at a screen really isn't much of play. I had to learn to play again. I fished like crazy. When we were kids, we were always fishing. We had a boat, Dad was a teacher, we were up at the lake all summer. We fished and we fished and we fished, and I got a little tired of fishing. And so Wendy and I got together, and she's like, they went fishing a few times. They didn't have a boat or cabin, so they went a few times. Fishing and fishing. And I was like, you want to go fishing? Sure. And then, of course, if we go fishing, I get to fill at everything and clean it all up, so that, that's pretty exciting too. So I didn't really want to do it, but it was a year or two ago, a couple years ago, it was just the two of us, and we went out in the boat, and it was really a perfect day, a little bit of a breeze, but very calm. I don't remember if we caught fish or not, but all of a sudden I remembered, to be out on the water and to be here and just, wow, that felt good. It was just, and if I'm reeling, if I don't catch anything, it doesn't really matter. We like to catch a few, but it was just this, returning to a sense of play. And now it's like, yeah, we need to get out more on the boat. We need to go fishing more. Just, yeah, there's work afterwards, but this is play. This is where I kind of, my whole body can kind of let loose a little bit. It's stress reliever. Play connects us. And then there's the other side of me that I still struggle with. We were up at the cabin Easter for a week, doing some renovations to our cabin. And I said to Wendy before we left, I said, okay, we're quitting at 5 o'clock at supper time, and then we're going to take the evenings off. Yes. But there's no way I'm going to get enough work done. And our kids came up, and then Jordan, our middle son, came up, and he's staying for most of the week. Well, Jordan is in some ways a duplicate of his dad, and once he gets going, he gets into he gets in high gear and he just goes, and that's what happened to the two of us. We just took off, and we put in 12, 14-hour days every day. And by the time we were done, we got most of what we had done that was exciting, and I came home, and it took me a week of going to bed at 8:30 to recover. I was exhausted, and I was not happy. Where was the time where we spent just not working? So there's a few things to learn in that. But if something's enjoyable, we do more of it. A few other things in here. There's a little bit of we're talking a lot about the Israelites and what happened. There's also the Egyptians in this. And I really like this. This was in Mitch Albom's book, Have a Little Faith. He's a Jewish, and he's writing a book about faith. He's actually asked by his rabbi to write the rabbi's eulogy years before he dies. So he gets and he connects with his old rabbi who he hasn't really seen, and faith hasn't been a part of his life for quite a while. But he goes and meets this rabbi over and over and over again, and they have meetings and discuss things, and he starts to come alive a little bit. And this is one of the things he said. As he's talking to his rabbi, and he's reflecting on things in his life that have happened. It is 1974, and I am in my religious high school. The subject is the parting of the Red Sea. I yawn. What is left to learn about this? I've heard it a million times. I look across the room to a girl I like and contemplate, I wonder how hard it would be to get her attention. There's a Talmudic commentary here, the teacher says. Oh, great, I figured. This means translation, which is slow and painful. But as the story unfolds, I begin to pay attention. After the Israelites safely crossed the sea, the Egyptians chased after them and were drowned. God's angels wanted to celebrate the enemy's demise. According to the commentary, God saw this and grew angry. He said, in essence, stop celebrating, for those were my children too. Those were my children too. What do you think of that, the teacher asks us. Someone else answers, but I know what I think. I think it is the first time I've heard that God might love the enemy as well as us. Years later, I will forget the class, forget the teacher's name, forget the girl across the room, but I will remember the story. Both sides, the other side. The Egyptians, I expect, needed to express their pain in some kind of dance as well. Husbands and friends and sons never returned home. They were gone. Both sides need some kind of a dance, some kind of expression. What do we do with that? The crossing of the Red Sea was not possible because of Moses. Kind of obviously, they attribute it to God and their dancing and singing. In this case, it was impossible for Moses to have, caused this. Moses, didn't have that kind of power. It was a miracle. It was supernatural. It was really outside of their natural causes. The sea parts, the land dries, they walk through, the enemy comes in, the sea rolls back in, and the enemy's done for. And so that would have been really something to watch, very outside of natural causes, and of course they attributed it to God, because the coincidence there's no way to explain that coincidentally. And what I was wondering, do we do with that in our own lives? What if something good and amazing happens to us? Do we attribute it to God? And I find myself being very careful with that language. I shared a story, if you heard last weekend, about how we were driving and it was so icy and we almost had an accident. It was so close. Wendy did this amazing driving and launched the car over the median and around the car that was going to hit us and back on the road again. And it was amazing. And I was like, how did you get those race car abilities from? It was amazing, So do I say, God was there, God saved us, God cared so much for us that he saved us. Oh, that's great. Okay. What about last year when our truck and trailer both got totaled off? Did God not care? What about when people get sick and ill and die? And like Carrie, you were explaining this morning how all of these other things are happening in places. What do we do with that? How do we language that? How do survivors feel about what happened? And what messages do we draw from that? And the question often comes down to why? And most of the time, the why is not answerable. And it all gets very confusing. So what do we do? Well, I think what we do is we throw our questions out there, we rage, we cry, and do something until maybe we're kind of spent, we're exhausted. Maybe we do that more than once. And then we kind of adapt. What happens is we adapt and eventually be grateful for something. And the question of why starts to fade. And in either case of the joy or the sorrow, we express emotions, we dance, we learn to live with the memories and the experiences, we continue on, we keep going, and the why becomes less important. The dancing, in either case, is more the key. And we have sharing time here most Sundays. It's a form of dancing, of celebration, of grief or frustration, of joy, hurt, disappointment, excitement, something shared. We belong, we bring who we are, what we're struggling with, and it's okay. All of the things we do here, singing, scripture, sharing announcements, silence, music for meditation, communion, all facilitate some kind of connection between us. They are rituals. Rituals are a thing we do frequently over and over again. And often when we don't know what to do, we do a ritual. But it's not the rituals that are so important. Sometimes we tend to get that muddled up. It's not the rituals, it's the doing of something, the expression, and this belonging and doing together that helps us carry on. This togetherness. And there's a lot of study that says resilience can usually be traced to belonging. If you belong, you can be very resilient. When my mother passed away, I was working on the funeral, doing the eulogy. There was so much going on. And my family, my siblings, my parents, we were and still are kind of messy. The day was quite confusing, and I had so many different emotions, just confused. Your brain is a little fuzzy. But there were lots of people that helped me through that. I have a cousin that I'm quite close with. And we walked arm in arm to the burial. We just had our kind of arms around each other, and we just walked away to the burial. That helped me get through. Our children were there. That helped us to get through. Joe did a really wonderful job of the service. That helped me get through. And then there was this part where some of you showed up at the funeral. And if you could have heard me, if you were close enough, if you would have heard me as I was walking along and I would see your face, I literally did this inside. I didn't show it, but that's what happened to me every time I saw somebody. It was like this sharp intake of breath. And something inside of me shifts. I can do this. I got this. I belong to all of this. It's kind of like you all danced and sang with me in one way, and I was, very grateful for that. This togetherness, belonging, is so important for us. Often in our culture, expressions of emotion are viewed as weakness, and when it came to burying the ashes, I was a mess, really. There's this ritual that finalizes everything. My father had passed away a while ago. Now Mother and both of my parents are gone. Regardless of how messy it was, I'm at the stage in life where both parents are gone. What do you do with that? What I really wanted to do, what I really needed to do, was fall to the ground on my knees and just sob. I knew that, and yet I didn't. It's not really acceptable. It's not okay. We don't really do that. It might make some other people around us feel very uncomfortable. I might feel uncomfortable. So really, there's this shame thing that hangs around in that. So I just held back and I cried silently, and I didn't dance very well at that point. And maybe sometimes we don't dance so well as well. But we try. Another part of that burial ceremony was not everybody, but people put a shovel full of dirt into it. You put the urns in, and so we were doing this. And we were just finishing that. And our daughter Nadine pipes up. Well, Grandma isn't going to like that very much. She's going to have to get right out and sweep that all off. And if you knew Grandma, if you know Mom, you could eat off the floors. There was never a speck of dust anywhere in her house. And we just all burst out laughing after this, big emotional part. And we just all burst out laughing. And later Nadine was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? She was just mortified by what she said, and she was apologizing to everybody. And I said, nah, no apologies. I said, that was absolutely perfect. The way she sang, her dance right there was perfect for the moment. We understood what Mom was like. It was this reflection, and in a flash there's this reflection. That's what Mom was like. There's togetherness, this laughter and grief, all in one package. Everybody dancing together, both grief and understanding and joy and mournful, all at the same time. It was wonderful. That was a good dance. In the congregation, like I said here, we dance in many ways. The rituals, the things we do. I've been in some congregations where we really, where they really did dance, bounce around, dance, and that's okay. It's just different. How we dance is how we dance in our joy and our grief and whatever. And I'm just really grateful and glad that we get to dance together and that we all belong. Amen.